Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. I am very happy to be here with my dear friend Fran, who is my co-host. Fran is in Northern Alberta and she is a teacher. She's been a veteran teacher of elementary school age children for the last 34 years. And I am at the moment in Southern British Columbia, and I'm a full-time rapid transformational therapy practitioner. Fran does rapid transformational therapy part-time. And we are here today with a lovely guest. This is episode 49, and Fran will have the honors to introduce our guest today.
And Marina, it's wonderful to see you. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to you too, Will. Will is coming to us from Trier, Germany. Will Aylward, and we have wanted to have Will on our show for quite some time now, because Will does what we do. He also does rapid transformational therapy from Germany. So he is originally from the UK and transported over to Germany, actually ping-ponging around the world a little bit, and he'll tell us about that. But since 2014, he's been helping hundreds of people, even in 50 countries worldwide, to overcome their mindset blocks, fears, and doubts, and to start a new chapter in their life story. Thank you, Will, for being here today. It's wonderful to see you. So, Will, what else would you like our viewers to know a little bit about you and your background? I got to know you from the online journal, I think you'd call it, Tiny Buddha. But I know you've been in many magazines. You've had your work published in many magazines online. You've got an ebook, which is fantastic. I've had stuff coming into my inbox from you, which I really, truly enjoy. What would you like our viewers to know about you?
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you, Marina and Fran, for inviting me here. Very happy to be here. So, great question. What else would I like the viewers to know? I think understanding that, and you'll probably find this as well, that people who help, they're normally people who have gone through difficult times. And I think, RTT practitioners, coaches, therapists, normally in their story, there's some struggle, there's some challenges that they've overcome. So I think maybe it's helpful to share briefly sort of my story and how I got into, let's say, the world of personal development or coaching. So it all started when I was 20. So I'd left school, hadn't particularly had many goals, wasn't very goal driven. I was like floating downstream, like following life. And I fell into a job in selling insurance, which I absolutely hated. It was not aligned with who I was. But nevertheless, there was just this every day waking up, going to the job, earning money. And at 20, I was like, there must be more to life than this, must be more to life than just going to work and doing boring work and being paid okay, but not really being fulfilled. And I started to develop anxiety, which was something totally new to me. I'd never thought of myself as anxious or nervous. I was always reasonably confident, reasonably happy. But I realized now that this was just my mind's way, my spirit's way of saying, like, something's not right here, something's not in alignment. And although it was really difficult at the time, I was having panic attacks almost every day and just social anxiety. My confidence was very low. It was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because it set me on this new path to realize that, okay, I get to decide my story. I don't have to go with the flow. I don't have to let life and other people dictate how I live. There's choices that I can make that can put me on a different path. And I think this is what I love most about helping other people. And you'll probably understand this as well, is we do have this choice. We get to wake up every single day and it's a fresh start. It's a new chapter. So yeah, so that's the quick version of my story and sort of how I got into what I'm doing.
The one thing that struck me in this is, my goodness, I wish I had that insight when I was 20 years old. It hit me much later in life, so that's amazing.
Yeah, super grateful for it. And yeah, at the time it was terrifying, like anxiety and the panic attacks. But actually, that that distress and that sort of inner turmoil was something that could sort of wake me up to realize, like, oh, I'm not just someone who's going through life. Like, I get to decide, and the choices that I can make.
Okay.
Amazing.
So when you decided to be in a helping career, you first were in insurance, but I mean, going from selling insurance to going into a helping career, those are like almost two ends of the spectrum. I hate to say that to anybody that sells insurance out there, but like what a difference that is. Like what there was that nudge there, but how
Mm,
did you end up changing your whole career path for that?
mm. Yeah, great question. It took a while. So I was selling travel insurance. So I was on the phone listening to people living abroad, listening to people backpacking. And I decided one day, like, why couldn't I be that person, who's in New Zealand or in Australia? So I set myself a goal, which was to sort of quit my job and save enough money so that I could go off and travel. And that's what I did for a year. I backpacked around New Zealand, and it was, yeah, a whole process of like just learning to trust myself again. My relationship with myself wasn't strong because I was in debt. I was drinking too much. I was, going to a job that I didn't enjoy, and I was like deceiving myself. So my relationship with myself was like in different pieces. So by going to New Zealand, I had to learn to like manage money. I had to learn to make good decisions. I had to learn to pretty much trust myself and get to know, who I really am. So through traveling, I did all these different jobs, worked on farms. I was working in hospitality. I was working doing sort of building, manual work, all these different things. And that helped me to realize that it's always been about people. I've always enjoyed having great relationships with people. I've always enjoyed like the camaraderie, and that was the seed that was planted when I came back from New Zealand. Was like, oh, whatever I'm supposed to be doing now, it's got to be people based. I can't be sat in an office, just speaking to voices. Like, I need to be interacting, and that's how I sort of fell into coaching. Was I was working in a school, so I actually went back to my old high school as a teaching assistant, and I loved working with children. But it wasn't the best thing for me. Wasn't seeing a child go from like a C to an A grade, which of course is amazing, and it's that's important. But it was seeing a child's confidence go up. See a child dare to put their hand up and dare to fail more. So that was the sort of moment for me where I was like, oh, it's about people, and it's about helping people develop in their confidence, their clarity. And I work a lot with children as well, which I love to do. And I've sort of worked within schools locally in Luxembourg. So I love working with adults, but yeah, there's a special place in my heart working with children as well, because as you know, like, we can get it right early on. We can give them self-belief, we can give them that confidence, and then they're set for life, I think.
Mhm. I agree. Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely something you and Fran is involved. And are you still today involved with children?
Yeah, I do some mentoring. Up until September this year, I was working as a mentor in a school. So my role was working with students, helping them with confidence issues or friendship issues, managing anxiety for stress, exam stress, for example. And absolutely loved it. Super, super rewarding. Having a young person, so they were aged between 11 and 18, coming in and just giving them that space to to talk, to express themselves, and then giving them some strategies. So yeah, still recently working
It's
with
such a
children.
powerful thing to do. Like, I always admire Fran and the influence she has over younger children than you are working with, or we're working with. And it's just such an open canvas to help people develop, and exactly like you say, to instill in them at a very young age self-confidence, self-belief. That really excites me. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool.
So, Will, this might be off topic a bit, but I want to know what the school systems are like in where you are there in Europe, in Germany, Luxembourg. You're close to the Belgian border as well, there where you live. I know in my home province here in Alberta, Canada, there's not a whole lot of focus on mental health in children. There's a lot of focus on academic, lots of academic intensity from schools, from the system, but not so much on mental health. And there's always cutbacks. It seems to be that the government tries to pull the money away where it's simplest, right? And that's from mental health and those types of coaching. Like when you talk about how you're working with the kids, helping develop their self-esteem and confidence and just their ability to believe in themselves. I just have I envy that, because really we don't have a lot of that type of professional in the system until it's too late. When it's like, when the child has already gone through lots of trauma and lots of heartache and lots of everything, then there's a lot of money put in, but not beforehand. Like I just wonder what it's like in Europe. Is it better there?
Yes and no. It's gotten better. So since when I was at school, I really noticed the difference. I also taught meditation in a primary school, which for me was amazing because children, as they're all over the place, and there's a lot of skepticism from teachers, like they're not going to sit down for you for half an hour and close their eyes and focus on their body. But if how to, the trick was almost turning it into a game. So I'd say to the really young children, just like, oh, can you hear those footsteps of the teacher walking in the corridor? And then they're present. Okay. And I'd have a gong or a bell that I'd ring, and then they'd be like, right, I want you to raise your hand. So I turn it into a game. I'd say, I want you to raise your hand when you hear the sound going and leaving the room. So they'd be paying attention, and then the hands would go up. So things like that wouldn't have happened. I never learned how to meditate. We had speakers come in like once a year. So this was like 15 years ago. We'd have speakers come in once a year, tick the box. Yep, they've learned about mental health. They learned about this, and it wasn't enough. It's definitely moving in the right direction. So there's a lot of focus now. The schools in Luxembourg, they have different psychologists or nurses. So the role that I was in was called a PDV mentor, personal development mentor, which we looked at, exam strategies. We looked at mental health. We looked at sleep hygiene. We looked at social media use. So like the hot topics that affect young people today in terms of their well-being. That being said, there's still a long way to go. I think because of the pandemic, there's been a massive decline in mental health, addiction to iPhones, online bullying, depression, anxiety, like the rates have gone up. So it's almost like we've taken some steps forward, but just with the state of the world, we've taken a step backwards. And my philosophy with school is, children do spend a lot of time in the schools, and they're influenced by their peers, they're influenced by the teachers, and there's so many amazing teachers, and I think teachers do a great job. But for me, if they go home to parents or a family who are not present, who haven't healed their own traumas, they're not tackling their own issues, we can only get so much. So for me, the solution is like, yes, absolutely, we can start in schools and focus there, but there's got to be this like collective responsibility for like, right, how can I become happier? How can I become more fulfilled? And I think it's happening. Like I think conversations like we're having now, they seem to be happening on a bigger scale, and there's more awareness of things like hypnosis and EFT tapping, all these different modalities, which 10 years ago would have been seen as woo-woo, or for a select few. Like, people are getting it. So I'm hopeful that it will continue, and there's definitely been progress, but there's still a way to go.
Well, it's almost, to me, prevention, because in working in RTT, all of us know is that when you regress somebody, 99.9% of the time, you go back to a situation in childhood where they started to believe negative things about themselves, or where there was an incident that influenced their life in such a way that they don't believe they're good enough or worthy or whatever else it is. So if you can start at an early age to change that, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but you're always worthy, you're always more than enough. It's just such an amazing tool. I really love that.
Absolutely. There's one girl I used to work with. and she was from Sweden. So I used to work in an international school, so the students were from all over the world, and there was one girl from Sweden, and she was just so confident, so happy. And I realized that, like, this is normal. I think we're born with a certain level of confidence. Like, in the right environment, we are happy, we are confident, we do thrive, we do learn. And I think, yeah, she taught me a lot in that, like, right, this is like the standard. I think our ancestors, even though life was tough, like, I think our ancestors were probably much happier than majority of people are now, which is absurd, because we've got all this opportunity, we've got these comforts. There's no saber-toothed tigers chasing us. The threats have changed. It's now comparison, it's now jobs. But yeah, she really taught me. This girl, I was just like, wow, like, she was my thing for her every time I saw her was just like, keep being you, because already there was teachers like, oh, stop calling out, put your hand down. I could see just really slowly just these little things like, okay, you're talking too much, you're too this, you're too loud. And it was heartbreaking to see it. It was so unconscious, like, people didn't want to destroy her confidence, and I don't think they ever could, luckily, because she's built it up to such a high level. But it's interesting working in schools. You can see how very, very slowly, we're just imposing our stuff on children, and it's not conscious, but we're fitting them into boxes, we're so that they can go through this system of education, when actually, yeah, their spirits and their confidence, and they're happy. And yeah, we have to sort of allow for that within a setting.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's the question, right? How do we continue to, like, we're a big wheel, right? Schools and government, it's just a big wheel. It's turning. It's like the Titanic, right? How do you steer it away in time? But I think you're right, Marina and Will both. I think 0 to 6 is where we need to really focus on the prevention part of it. And like you said, if we're not addressing the trauma in the parent, it's there's that trickle down effect, that it doesn't matter how, like, I think about myself, and I do take full responsibility for all my own children's. I mean, one's 30 and one's 28, but if they've got phobias, that's totally my fault, right? Because I mean, I did the best I could at the time, but I was suffering from my own trauma from my own childhood, and then that was generational, right? So nobody's blaming anyone here, but it's just an explanation. But it can't be an excuse anymore, because we know better now. So I don't know about how it is there, but sometimes I see victimhood, people wanting to stay in victimhood rather than let me work on myself and find out, peel the layers off the onion, and find out why it is that I behave this way, or why I parent this way. I said I'd never parent like my parents, and yet I find myself doing what, my father did, my mother did, whatever. And it's like Marina says, it's so ingrained. It's that the neurologically, we're programmed in that way, because that's what we lived when we were 0 to 6. And so the school system and peer groups and society and all of that, we just create that a little bit more. And so it's interesting what you say, but you're a mindset and mindfulness coach. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah. So mindset and mindfulness coaching, I realized early on that when I start working with someone, they've got their goals, or they've got their challenges, and that's conscious. That's what they sort of bring to the table the first few sessions. And then, as you'll both know, that's like the presenting problem. I'm not disciplined, or my relationships aren't good. So listening to that, listening to people, listening to understand how they see their world, that for me is really interesting, is their mindset. How do they see themselves? What do they believe is possible? Because we all live within a story of who we think we are, And of course, that's based on the past, that's based on some experiences, which there may be some truth, but often that can be a trap. I'm just this sort of person, or I'm an anxious person, I'm a depressed person. And when I was anxious, I'd always say my anxiety, which we know in RTT, if you own it, then you pick it up and you carry it with you, versus, okay, I sometimes feel anxious. That's more accurate. So mindset for me is everything. Like when I work with someone, I want to understand and really get how they see themselves and how that creates their reality, and then just very gently and compassionately, like holding a mirror up and saying, all right, okay, how are we creating this? And I think the mindfulness comes in, because for me, mindfulness is just this detachment from that story. It's a detachment from those beliefs, and it's this realization that, okay, we have a present moment right now. I can create a new path. I can become a writer. I can become a public speaker. I can become anything. I don't think everything's possible. Like, I'm never going to be a champion boxer, just the way that I'm built. But if I wanted to become a long distance runner, but I probably got the resources for that, and if I was committed, I could make that happen. So for me, the mindfulness comes in with the mindset, because I want to change people's beliefs. I want them to sort of see themselves differently, but it all happens in the now. So giving people some mindfulness strategies, meditation, I love to teach, and just giving people that break from thinking. And I think this is why hypnosis is popular, is it's just, okay, what's your internal state? You're feeling relaxed, notice your heartbeat. It's pressing that pause button on that busy mind, which like fish in water, we don't even know we're thinking half the time. We're having a conversation and the mind's going off, oh, I've got to go shopping. It's not until you experience that pause, that that sound of the bird tweeting, or that the sofa beneath you, you just become really aware of that you realize, like, oh, okay, maybe thought isn't everything. Maybe there's something beyond thinking, beyond beliefs, and that's just the now, the present moment.
So you said you were at the school until September. So what is happening in your life now?
Yeah, right now I'm doing sort of private coaching. So I still have sort of a handful of clients that I work with. I now do quite a lot of business coaching. So I'm head coach for a guy called Matt Essam, and we work with creative business owners, and we help them to sort of scale up their businesses. So he's very, very good business coach, and I'm there for the mindset blocks, pretty much. So when somebody's set a goal and they're procrastinating, we then have a call and sort of unpick those layers. And it's amazing, because these people are like very successful. They've got great businesses. They're super skilled at what they do, but yet there's still, on some level, there's a doubt. There's procrastination, which is so interesting, because I think we look at people and we think, wow, she's so confident. There's no way that she, doubts herself. There's no way. And yeah, I've worked with lots of people, different ages, different nationalities, and I think on some level we've all got a thorn. We've all got something painful inside of us, whether it's self-doubt or shame, guilt. Carl Jung would call it that shadow self. We've all got this shadow self that we don't want to face, we don't want to go towards. But I think there's a lot of growth to be found if we turn around and sort of face those parts.
I absolutely love it, because I think all of us have had some encounter with business coaches, and a business coach is one thing, but to get behind that lack of self-belief and lack of self-worth, and that kind of that blockage is phenomenal. I love that. I actually think that's fantastic. I think it's much needed.
Yeah. I think business coaching, if it's purely strategy, that's only half of it, isn't it? To say, oh, just go out and sell yourself.
Right.
Okay, but you're right. If someone's got a block, I think we're a human before we're a business owner. We're a human before we're a teacher. We're a human before we're our role. So I think business coaching, definitely more effective when there's that sort of mindset element to it.
I always see that there's an element of sales to all of us. And if you don't believe in your product, how are you going to sell it? If you absolutely believe in your product and you are the product, then then you have the ability to sell it with so much more ease and passion. But I think it's very hard for people to get to that point where they believe in themselves enough to just completely be out there and sell themselves. So I think that's absolutely phenomenal work that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Will, can you take us through the five, I think you called it anxiety or 5 steps. Anyway, the ones that came into my inbox that I wrote down and I paid attention to, actually, I shared them with some of my clients because they were good and I had never used them before. And as coaches, we collect lots from lots of other coaches and other, mentors, and who we've got our own coaches, right? So, but some of your work I had never heard before. So can you take us through those 5 steps? I think they're about limiting beliefs, or the anxiety, helping us with anxiety and limiting beliefs.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the challenge is the overthinking or breaking free from negative thought challenge.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll do my best to remember them. It's been a while since I wrote those, but I remember one of the tools, if you like, is when you're experiencing a negative thought, is just asking, is it true? Because the assumption is when we don't challenge the thought, or we're not even aware of what the thought is, there's just a feeling of, being uneasy. The assumption is, well, that must be true. My boss must be angry at me because the way she looked at me, or my partner, is ignoring me, which means that I must be not enough. So I know one of the tips is just asking that question, just pausing, just like, right, so let's say, for example, I've had a really bad day and I'm feeling like a failure as a husband, as a dad, for example, and my mind's racing. If I'm aware enough to realize, like, oh, this feeling, or the thought that's creating this feeling is I'm a failure. If I ask that question, is it true? I may feel like saying yes. That initial, when they're in that emotional state, like, yeah, I am. This feels real. But that's that sort of thought feeling fallacy. I feel a certain way, therefore it must be true. But if we slow down and ask that question, is it true? We can then start to see the wood from the trees. We can start to look at some evidence that goes against the thought that we have. So this is a really handy one. Maybe the thought is, I'm always going to be stuck. Okay, is that true? Look back in our life. Well, I didn't always have this problem. There's time when I didn't have this problem and I wasn't stuck. And if I'm going to live another 30, 40, 50 years, maybe the chances are that I can get unstuck with this. So yeah, that's definitely a good tip, is just becoming aware of what that thought is and just asking that question, like, curiously, like, okay, is it true?
And one of the ones that I really like is when you're in bed at night and there's just something that keeps on going. It's a worry, it's a fear, something, you just can't get it out of your head, and it's 2 a.m. and you haven't fallen asleep yet. And I wonder what I'll think about next.
Yes. Yeah. I used this 2 nights ago, funnily enough. I had a challenge, let's say, which you just try and not think about it, and it just pops up. It's like a beach ball, just keeps popping up. I had this, and I was like, right, what can I do? And my first thought was like, I should go have a whiskey and just pop downstairs. And I thought, no, I'll try this technique, and it doesn't always work. I think sometimes writing down or journaling or just speaking to someone is effective, but this works incredibly well. And you're right, it's just to follow your train of thought, see where it's going, and rather than pushing it away or buying into it or even questioning if it's true, exactly as you said, Fran, it's okay, that's interesting, or that's cool, I wonder what my next thought will be. And by asking that question, you just allow that thought to sort of go away, and then another thought will pop up, like, oh, I've got a meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And then you look at that thought and say, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what my next thought will be. And that just goes away. And then maybe the first thought comes back and you look at that. And again, it's just, I think the attitude has to be like curiosity, but just total acceptance for what that thought is. I think our thoughts come back when we try and push them away, we resist them, and we don't want to accept them, or we feel bad for feeling bad. It just adds that fuel to the fire. So this is a great tip, especially late at night if you're overthinking, or even just in the day, if there's just an intrusive thought which is just coming up. If you're going for a job interview, I can't do this. Oh, that's interesting. And it's just seeing that thought for what it is, because I think thoughts are only as powerful as the power we give to them. If we bow down to them and we assume that they're correct and they confirm our biggest fears, then this thought's going to seem like a huge mountain, versus, oh, interesting, there's a leaf just blowing in the wind. Oh, cool. Letting it go. Yeah, doesn't always work, but when it does, it's a good tool to have.
And the gremlin.
Ah, yes, the gremlin. The gremlin's good. This is a great one I used to do with the children I work with. So one of the mindfulness lessons would be asking them to draw this gremlin. So the idea is really simple. It's from the book called, I believe, How to Tame Your Gremlin. I can't remember who it's written by. But the idea is that voice that doubts and makes us feel anxious, compares ourselves, you can personify as a gremlin. So we've all experienced this gremlin in our mind. So the first step is to name it, and to give a name to that part of ourselves which is negative, judges, doubts. But what I'd do is I'd ask the students to draw a picture of it, and I'd say, right, make it funny. So one of my clients, she called hers Gunther. She's a German client, and I think Gunther was like furry, hairy, like pink and yellow spots, had like a really high pitched voice, wore lederhosen, and it really worked for her, because she'd have a negative thought, and rather than going, oh, that's me, I'm feeling bad, I'm thinking negatively and then feeling bad for that, she'd just go, oh, that's Gunther just popping up, and actually she'd laugh. And I worked with her on anxiety, and actually her anxiety improved very, very quickly just by changing her response to those negative thoughts. So we can have a lot of fun with the gremlin, but just giving it a funny name's the first step, bringing it to life, and then writing down the catchphrases. And they're always, when I do this exercise, I say, I've never met your gremlin, but I guarantee that on that list is, I'm not good enough, I'm too tall, fat, thin, loud, quiet, whatever it is. So I'd ask children to sort of write down those catchphrases, and then the next lesson we'd do like a cheerleader. So we'd write down, like, right, imagine the gremlin's gone on vacation for 2 weeks, and you've got someone who's going to support you, someone who's like a parent or a really good teacher. Who's this person? And it'll be like, they'd come up with a name. So it'd be like Mr. Feelgood, or and that was really good. And just to sort of realize that, oh, okay, you've got this gremlin, that's not you. That's not you choosing to feel negative. There's nothing wrong with you. As humans, we just have this, this gremlin, these little monsters in our mind that, and I talk about the negativity bias and why it exists and how it was good for our survival. So I sort of, tell children it's normal to feel negative, it's normal to feel bad, but there's things that we can do about it. So yeah, I love the gremlin exercise.
Mm-hmm. And Will, as you're talking, it reminds me, these are all little techniques that you and I and Marina use within our sessions, right? When we have a client, and they've got something going on, we often ask them to find it, to sometimes name it, to tell us what it looks like within their body. And when we can locate that, then we can move on through our session, because they've actually physicalized it within their body, right? We've all done it within our practice as well. So I like that when you take it and you actually we're teaching children that, yeah, we do have that thought. I can guarantee you that it's telling you you're not good enough, you're dumb, nobody wants to play with you, all those things that kids often think, right? I have no friends. Well, you're not the only one that believes that. We all believe that at some time, right? That's just that little gremlin within us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's another one. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just quickly, I was going to say, I'd teach that in like a group session. So I'd have people show their gremlins, and you'd have all the different children, different confidence levels, different nationalities. And that was the most refreshing part, was everyone realizing, cool, this is my gremlin. and I'd ask them to talk about, well, this is Mr. Bobby, and Mr. Bobby tells me that, you know, I'm not a good footballer, but, you know, I've been trying really hard. And then other people on the same table would go, oh no, you are a good footballer. And, you know, they just instinctively start supporting and start loving and start, you know, so yeah, this is what I really loved, was that, just that sense of vulnerability. And I talk about my gremlin, who I call Colin. You know, so I'd open up the session by talking, right, this is my gremlin Colin, I imagine he looks like this. And then children are like, oh, okay, here's an adult being vulnerable, because so often we're not. You know, head teachers are strict, and they've got to be, because they, you know, they've got to be this figure of authority. But actually, just to, you know, to sit down with children and say, right, you know, yes, I used to have anxiety. There's times where I don't feel happy. You know, it's so refreshing for students, because they go, oh, good, okay, not just me.
Yeah. And another one is acting or accepting.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very big on action taking. So, you know, when I have a coaching session with someone, I want to have even just a really small sort of baby step. So if we've discussed this big, you know, exciting, scary goal, I'll always say, right, what's one really small step that you can take forward? Because I think action is that bridge between having a goal in our head and then being able to touch it, feel it, celebrate it in, you know, weeks, months, years time. So this tool, you're right, this is just, you capture what the thought is, or, you know, let's say it's an anxious thought, to say, I've got to find a new job. You know, what can I do right now? What action can I take that can help me to address this thought? And maybe the thought is, oh, I could edit my CV. I could research jobs for 5 minutes. It puts us back in the driver's seat, and it's like, right, there is something that I can do about it. You know, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe the right action is just writing that action step down instead of going up and doing something. So it's like, right, what can I do right now to prevent this thought from developing and becoming bigger and scarier? Sometimes we can't act. Sometimes, you know, this is a memory or a thought from the past. We feel ashamed about it. And actually, there's no tangible action steps that we can take to feel better. That's when acceptance is really powerful. And it's just, acceptance is just leaving that thought alone, you know, maybe combining it with that, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what my next thought will be, tool. But just accepting, you know, there's nothing we have to do to accept. It's just that realization of, right, that is, you know, there's nothing that I can do right now to feel better. But actually, I think Eckhart Tolle talks about acceptance. And if you can't accept that you can't accept something, just accept the unacceptance, you know, which is a bit of a paradox. But if we can just bring that level of acceptance to the situation, it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be good. It's just, it is, you know, and then we're not adding fuel to that fire. We're not making that situation worse. It's just, right now, this is how I feel right now. This is my situation. And then starting from acceptance, you know, maybe some actions will become clearer in the future.
It's like accepting that you can't accept it. It's like, instead of trying to hold the beach ball under the water, it's just right, and giving all your energy to holding it down, holding that thought down or whatever, accepting, believing, forgiving, even sometimes, right? Forgiving. You just let the beach ball go and go, yeah, at this point in my life right now, that's just the way it is. And maybe tomorrow.
That analogy, Fran, that's a good one.
Yeah. And the last one, and as you were talking about the gremlins and drawing the gremlin, drawing Colin or whoever your gremlin is, you said to write about all the things that gremlin talks about, tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not good at football, that you're never going to make a basket in basketball. Oh, you know, like somebody's going to beat you up after whatever. And you have this last one, 2-to-1, the 2-to-1 positive hack, 2-to-1 positive hack.
Yeah, that's it. So the idea here is just when you catch a negative thought, is not replacing it, but just tilting the negativity bias in our mind. So let's say, for example, that I've shouted at my son. So I've got an almost 3-year-old son, and yeah, far from perfect. There's times where I get it wrong. Maybe a thought pops up that says, "Oh, I'm an awful dad," rather than just believing that thought, buying into it, dwelling on it, feeling bad for feeling bad, which is what our minds do. Maybe it's helpful to say, well, one, I'm not truly awful. Like, in that moment, I was shouted at him, or I didn't get it right, but I'm not always awful. It's that generalization. So maybe that's the first thought, which is not necessarily positive, but just a bit more. I think the idea is like neutralizing, right? It's like if there's a jury and the jury's out to say that we're a bad person, we have to balance that. We can't just, allow our mind to determine who we think we are. We have to sort of explore the whole truth of it. So maybe the thought that I'll say to myself is like, well, I'm not always awful. There's times where I'm loving, there's times where I'm supportive, there's times where I'm understanding. Maybe the second thought is like, I can get better at this. I can have this experience where I've, fallen short from my own standard, and I can become better. So it's like a growth mindset thing. I'm not staying in that fixed mindset. It's like, well, I can become better. And then with those two to one, in terms of the mind, which with that negativity bias, as is always going to notice, remember, and dwell on the negative, you're just giving it some different food, you're giving it some different calories, and just, those thoughts can make a little bit of a difference in tilting those scales. And it doesn't have to be massively positive. If I wouldn't go from I'm an awful dad to I'm the world's best dad, because that wouldn't feel accurate. I think in terms of tipping those scales, it's got to be genuine, and it's got to be more neutral than positive. So it's maybe I'm not always awful. I'm actually a good dad most of the time. Rather than I'm the world's best dad and everything. But just, yeah, it's leveling that playing field. It's not staying in that negative stuck state, and it's just right. Okay, there's one time I got it wrong, but I won't always get it wrong, and yeah, doesn't mean I'm an awful dad.
It's always the intention behind things as well. And I was thinking about that when Fran was talking about her parenting. And if you have the intention to be a bad parent, that's a different thing. But I don't think any of us have. We have the intention to be great parents, but sometimes life happens, or they push our buttons, especially at that 3-year age and the teenage years. It's challenges, and you sometimes just react in the moment, and that doesn't make you a bad parent. You'll still have the intention of being a great parent. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me, talking about intention, I think it's Gabor Mate. I saw him coaching somebody, and he said, "Oh, tell me the exact moment when you woke up and decided to, be a terrible parent."
Right.
And the guy laughed, and he's like, "Well, I haven't." And he's just like, "Well, you need some self-compassion then, because beating yourself up isn't working." Again, we're still taking responsibility for who we are and our flaws, but it's just that it's in that frame of you're not consciously choosing to do this. You're not consciously choosing to be a bad parent or bad boss, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So what else would you like us to know, and our viewers to know, about when we get stuck in a mindset? Like, we've got 5 incredible things we can do to get ourselves out of that January blue, really, because right here, right now, outside, it's looking January blue, and then sometimes we call it the January blahs, because it's the post-event letdown, after Christmas, after New Year's, and we've got all these goals that we've got for the new year, and yet sometimes we just don't feel like it. We don't feel like strapping on our shoes and running, or we don't feel like going to the gym, or that piece of cake over there looks just wonderful right now. It'll put me into the spot where I can feel better. So what can you tell? What last few little hints? Because I'm thinking that right this moment, as I sit here not being able to, well, Marina knows this, I broke my kneecap
Oh no.
Skating about a month ago, and I'm having the January blues because I can't even enjoy a gray day outside, let alone a nice sunny day. So Will, give me some, just give me some boost here so I can get out of my January blue.
Yeah, my number one tip for people who, you know, are feeling stuck, and you know, when there's a genuine reason for that, is the Japanese principle of Kaizen. And Kaizen is all about the power, I think it translates as the beauty of small steps, but it's very much against the Western philosophy, which is big goals, lots of action, and there's a time for that. But actually, a Kaizen step, I think of it as planting seeds. You know, a tree doesn't become a tree overnight. The first step is just planting that tree. I mean, it's just little droplets of water, and over time and with patience and love, that grows. So Kaizen is like, right, what is just one small step that I can take today, which is either gonna get me ahead or maybe just keep me, you know, functioning, maybe just keeping me at a good level. So I've had SAD, like winter depression, most of my adult life. This winter, touch wood, it's been pretty mild, but last winter I just wrote something for Tiny Buddha actually around this. It was, yeah, worst one ever. I think I had long COVID as well, which didn't help. What I would do is just write down, if I was just going to achieve 10 things today, what would they be? And sometimes it was just super simple things, just like, right, taking the trash out, having a shower. You know, these things seem so difficult when we're in that state. And part of us is like, you know, I'm a high achiever. These are such simple things. We don't want to accept where we are. So I think the first thing is just like, right, be okay with feeling bad, be okay with feeling in a funk, be okay with feeling, you know, down, and realizing, okay, this is where I am. And then just setting some really small but realistic targets that are either going to keep you sort of, you know, floating or are going to help you to achieve those goals. So I would just do, right, what's the top 10 things? If I just did these 10 things today, would help me. So it'd be like, right, call my grandma. I know that always, you know, cheers me up. 2, have a shower. 3, reply to that email. You know, it's really small things, but actually at the end of the day, to see, right, okay, I've ticked those off, we get that dopamine rush, there's that sense of like moving forward, and we can celebrate that, and then we can feel okay about that. So that'd be my number one thing, is just like really small, realistic targets. Because yeah, we go online and everyone's starting a new business or writing a third book, and it's so demotivating because, you know, we feel like, well, I should be like that. And it's like, no, like life is difficult. There's times where we have to, you know, if life forces us to play at the level that we're at. So I think just being where we are, setting some really realistic targets, having that compassion, that self-compassion that I spoke about, is really important. So yeah, that would be my number one tip.
I'm going to do it.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So, Will, if our viewers want to get hold of you, what is the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, best way, put in my website, which is just my name. So Will Aylward, AYLWARD.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm fairly active on there. And I have a YouTube channel as well, where I have some sort of meditations on there and videos around, yeah, different mindset topics. So that's my name, and I believe it's called Mindset and Wellbeing. But there's not many Will Aylwards in the world, so if somebody types my name into YouTube, then I'll definitely pop up.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This was enlightening. It was amazing. Thank you for doing such amazing work in the world. And I am actually saw some of your meditations on YouTube. I am an absolute meditation junkie. So thank you for that.
Brilliant.
And yeah, thank you so much for being here today, Will. It was wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sue.
And Will, I really like your ideas about how to work with the kids, right? Like, I'm going to take that idea about the group gremlin, and use it. I just think it's fantastic. I've never thought about that before, about drawing your gremlin, coloring it, naming it, turning the paper over and telling, you know, writing all about the things that the gremlin tells you about, and then counteracting that with all the things that you know about yourself. And I think it's wonderful.
It's
Great
amazing.
work.
Yeah, no,
Thank
thank
you.
you so
Good.
much.
Yeah, let me know how it goes. Children love it, and I think,
Yes.
yeah, mindfulness doesn't have to be meditation, doesn't have to be, mindfulness. It can be, I'd say to them, do it mindfully, draw that picture, but it's just that level of self-awareness. They become a little bit more aware about what they're thinking. And then the challenge after is, right, for the next week, pay attention to the gremlin. Notice when you snap at your friend. Notice when, you feel a bit lonely because your friends ignored you. So that's the next step, is once you're aware of that gremlin, turn it into a bit of a game, right? Just pay attention. Just notice when that gremlin pops up. So yeah, let me know how you get on.
I will. And I think a parent could actually say that to their little child too, or if you got a 7-year-old or whatever, and something's coming up, it's like, hey, is that you, or is that your little gremlin talking now? Right. And so then they can actually become aware, because I think being conscious is the first step. Awareness is the first step, that, okay, I did that again. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why I'm thinking that way. Taking that one step out and just becoming aware of our thoughts is so super important to making change, making healing, making things change in your life to the best, right? To the better. So
Yeah.
thank you for being here, Will. It's been wonderful having you. And for those of our guests that haven't had a chance to see your book, what is the name of your book, and how can we get it?
Yeah, the book is called Becoming Unstuck. Then the subtitle is your simple step-by-step guide to taking charge of your life. So that's available on Amazon. You can order it as a paperback or on the Amazon, is it called Amazon Kindle? Is that right?
Okay.
Amazon Kindle
Yeah.
copy. And I also have a copy on my website as well, which is an ebook version. If somebody, wants to check that out as well. But definitely Amazon, it's on there.
And do you have an Audible version?
Good question. It's not on Audible. I do have a version that I recorded, which is an audiobook version, which I believe is on my website for sale. I'll have to double check, but there is a version I've recorded. I'm 95% sure it's on my website.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Will. It's been a pleasure. Happy New Year to you, and give your children and your wife hugs from this side of the world for us.
I will do. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.